Impossible signatures. The sensor array at Outpost Theta 9 had been operating flawlessly for 300 cycles. That's why Lieutenant Krell initially dismissed the readings as a malfunction. Energy signatures don't just appear out of nowhere, especially not ones that defied the fundamental laws of physics. Run the diagnostic again, Krell ordered, his four manipulator appendages tapping impatiently on the console. The crystalline display flickered, then stabilized. The readings remained unchanged. Lieutenant, his subordinate, Ensign Vex, called out, "I've run 3 separate diagnostics. The array is functioning perfectly." Krell's antennae twitched in frustration. The energy signatures showed ships moving at speeds that violated the mass energy conservation principle. They displayed power outputs that exceeded theoretical maximums by several orders of magnitude. It was impossible. Contact Central Command, Krell decided. They need to know our array is malfunctioning. But Central Command had already received similar reports from 12 other outposts along the border. Admiral Zarkith, commander of the Empire's Third Fleet, stood in the war room aboard the flagship Dominance, his massive frame casting long shadows across the holographic display. "This is clearly a coordinated sensor malfunction," Zarkith declared to his assembled officers. "Perhaps some new form of interference from the Void Nebula." "With respect, Admiral," Science Officer Thrain interjected, "the readings are consistent across all arrays. The probability of identical malfunctions occurring simultaneously is—" "I'm aware of the statistics, Officer," Zarkith cut him off. "But what you're suggesting is that unknown ships are operating with technology that breaks the laws of physics. That's not just improbable, it's impossible." The discussion was interrupted by an urgent transmission from Outpost Gamma 7. "Admiral, visual confirmation. We have visual confirmation of unknown vessels." The holographic display shifted, showing grainy footage from Gamma 7's long-range optical sensors. What appeared on screen made every officer in the room freeze. Ships, clearly artificial constructs, moved through space in ways that shouldn't be possible. They accelerated without apparent reaction mass, turned at angles that should have torn them apart, and generated energy fields that pulsed with impossible harmonics. "Analysis," Zarkith demanded, his voice barely concealing his shock. Science Officer Thrain worked frantically at his console. "The ships appear to be bending local space-time. They're not moving through space in the conventional sense. They're rewriting the rules of motion as they go." "That's not possible," someone whispered. "Clearly it is," Thrain replied, his voice trembling. "Because they're doing it." Admiral Zarkith straightened to his full height. "Alert the High Council. We need to convene an emergency session." Within hours, the Kryn Empire's ruling council had gathered in the Chamber of Governance, a massive crystalline dome at the heart of the capital world. The 12 members, each representing a different sector of the Empire, watched the footage in stunned silence. "These ships," Councillor Varn began, "they cannot exist. Our understanding of physics, developed over 10,000 cycles, proves they cannot exist." "And yet they do," replied Councillor Mira, her sensory clusters flashing with agitation. "The question is not whether they exist, but how." Chief Scientist Zorek addressed the council. "We analyzed every aspect of these vessels. Their propulsion systems generate negative energy states. Their hulls are composed of materials that exhibit properties we've only theorized about. Their power cores, they appear to be tapping into the quantum foam itself." "Who built them?" demanded Councillor Drex. Zorak hesitated. "The design aesthetics are crude by our standards, utilitarian, but the technology itself is beyond anything we've encountered. Initial linguistic analysis of intercepted transmissions suggests they call themselves humans." "Humans?" Councillor Varn scoffed. "Never heard of them." "Nor has anyone else," Zorak confirmed. "They appear to have emerged from an unexplored region of the galaxy. But that's not the most concerning aspect." The holographic display changed, showing detailed scans of the human ships. "Look at the construction. These vessels weren't built by a civilization that gradually developed this technology. They were built by beings who looked at the laws of physics and decided they were more like guidelines. A murmur of disbelief rippled through the chamber. "That's preposterous," Counselor Drex declared. "The laws of physics are absolute. They govern everything in the universe." "Do they?" Zorak challenged. "Or have we simply never encountered a species audacious enough to question them?" Admiral Zarkith, who had been observing silently, stepped forward. "The strategic implications are clear. If these humans possess technology that can ignore physical laws, they represent either the greatest threat or the greatest opportunity the Empire has ever faced. We must make contact," Counselor Mira urged. "Understand their intentions. And if their intentions are hostile," Zarkith countered. The chamber fell silent. For the first time in millennia, the Kryn Empire faced something truly unknown. Something that challenged not just their military might, but their fundamental understanding of reality itself. "Deploy the fleet," the High Counselor finally ordered. "But proceed with caution. If these humans can break the laws of physics, we must assume they can break us just as easily." As the council dispersed, Chief Scientist Zorak remained behind, studying the data. Something about the human ships nagged at him. It wasn't just that they defied physics. It was the way they defied it. As if the humans hadn't simply discovered new laws, but had somehow convinced the universe to play by different rules altogether. For the first time in his long career, Zorak felt something he hadn't experienced since his youth. Genuine curiosity mixed with fear. What kind of species looks at the impossible and says, "Let's try it anyway"? The Empire was about to find out. The laws of physics are suggestions. The Kryn Third Fleet, comprising 200 of the Empire's finest warships, maintained formation as they approached the coordinates where the human vessels had been detected. Admiral Zarkith stood rigid on the bridge of the Dominance, every sensory organ alert for the slightest anomaly. "Contact in 3, 2, 1. The tactical officer's countdown ended in stunned silence. Space itself seemed to ripple. Not the familiar distortion of conventional FTL travel, but something else entirely. Reality appeared to fold in on itself, creating impossible geometries that hurt to look at directly. Then, with no flash of light or surge of energy, the human fleet simply appeared. "Impossible," someone whispered. "They didn't emerge from subspace. They just manifested." Science Officer Thrain was frantically analyzing the readings. "Admiral, they didn't travel here. They convinced space that they were already here." "What does that even mean?" Zarkith demanded. "I don't know." Thrain's professional composure cracked. "Nothing in our understanding of physics allows for this. They're not using propulsion as we know it. They're negotiating with reality itself." The human fleet hung motionless in space. 50 ships of varying sizes, their hulls a patchwork of different materials and design philosophies. They looked almost primitive compared to the sleek Kryn vessels, yet the energy readings they produced made the Empire's most advanced technology look like children's toys. "Incoming transmission," the communications officer announced. "Audio only." Zarkith nodded. "Put it through." The voice that filled the bridge was surprisingly pleasant, speaking flawless Kryn despite the language's complexity. "Greetings, Kryn Empire. I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Expeditionary Force. We come in peace, seeking knowledge and friendship." Zarkith exchanged glances with his officers. The translation was too perfect, too natural. These humans had somehow mastered their language without any prior contact. "Admiral Chen," Zarkith responded. "I am Admiral Zarkith of the Kryn Empire. Your vessels, they exhibit capabilities that should be impossible. We require an explanation." There was a pause, then what sounded like a chuckle. "Ah, yes. We get that reaction a lot. Would you prefer the technical explanation or the philosophical one?" "Both," Zarkith demanded. "Very well. Technical first. We discovered that the laws of physics aren't quite as rigid as most species believe. They're more like very strongly worded suggestions. With the right approach, you can convince the universe to make exceptions. The bridge crew looked at each other in disbelief. As for the philosophical explanation, Admiral Chen continued, humans have a saying, rules are meant to be broken. We just applied that to physics. That's not how reality works, Science Officer Thrain protested. Isn't it? Chen's voice held amusement. Your own quantum physics shows that observation affects reality. We just took it a step further. If reality is influenced by consciousness, then with enough determination, consciousness can rewrite reality. Demonstrate, Zarkith ordered, his tactical instincts screaming that he needed to understand this threat. Certainly. Watch your sensors. One of the human ships, no larger than a Kryn destroyer, began to glow. Not with energy that the sensors could identify, but with something else. Something that registered as pure impossibility. The ship split into 2 identical copies. Then 4. Then 8. Each copy was perfect, down to the quantum level. They weren't illusions or projections. They were real, physical ships that had spontaneously come into existence. Conservation of mass and energy. Thrain whispered in horror. They just violated the most fundamental law of the universe. We didn't violate it, Chen's voice corrected. We asked nicely if it could make an exception. The universe said yes. The implications hit the Kryn command staff like a physical blow. These humans hadn't just developed advanced technology. They had somehow learned to negotiate with the fundamental forces of reality itself. Why reveal this to us? Zarkith asked, military training keeping his voice steady despite his inner turmoil. Because we believe in transparency, Chen replied. And because we hope you'll choose friendship over fear. The galaxy is vast, Admiral. There's room for different approaches to understanding it. But fear was already taking root. The Empire had maintained dominance through superior technology and strict adherence to scientific principles. Now they faced beings who treated those principles as optional. Admiral, his tactical officer whispered, if they can duplicate ships at will, create matter from nothing, ignore inertia, our weapons, our defenses, they're meaningless. Zarkith knew what had to be done. The Empire couldn't allow such a threat to exist. They had to strike first, while they still had the element of surprise. All ships, he ordered on the fleet command channel, prepare to engage. Target their command vessel. Admiral, Chen's voice came through again, somehow on their secure channel. I really wish you hadn't done that. We came in peace. We wanted to share knowledge, not demonstrate why fighting us is inadvisable. Fire, Zarkith commanded. 200 Kryn warships unleashed their primary weapons simultaneously. Beams of directed energy, projectiles accelerated to near-light speed, and spatial distortion waves all converged on the human flagship. They all stopped exactly 1 meter from the hull. Not deflected. Not absorbed. Simply stopped. You see, Chen's voice continued conversationally. We convinced the universe that violence doesn't work in our immediate vicinity. Your weapons are functioning perfectly. They just can't affect us because we've locally redefined what effect means. The Kryn fleet's second volley had the same result. And the third. Admiral Zarkith. Chen said, her voice now carrying the hint of steel. We don't want to fight. But if you insist on continuing this aggression, we'll have to demonstrate why the laws of physics should never be weaponized by those who understand them fully. For the first time in his military career, Zarkith felt true helplessness. They weren't fighting a superior force. They were fighting beings who had transcended the very framework in which force had meaning. Stand down, he ordered his fleet, the words tasting like ashes. All ships, stand down. A wise decision, Chen acknowledged. Now shall we discuss peaceful coexistence? We have so much to share if you're willing to expand your understanding of what's possible. As his fleet powered down their weapons, Zarkith realized the truth. The Empire hadn't encountered a more advanced civilization. They'd encountered a species that had evolved past the need for advancement as they understood it. The humans hadn't built impossible ships. They'd made the impossible possible. And that terrified him more than any weapon ever could. When the impossible becomes reality, the aftermath of the failed attack left the Kryn fleet in disarray. Admiral Zarkith had called for a tactical withdrawal to regroup, but the human ships simply appeared around them in a perfect sphere, maintaining precise distance without any visible means of propulsion. "They're not pursuing," the tactical officer reported, confusion evident in his voice. "They're escorting us." "More like containing us," Zarkith muttered. He opened a channel to Admiral Chen. "What are your intentions?" "To educate," came the simple reply. "Your empire has dominated this region of space through technological superiority. We think it's time you learned there are different kinds of superiority." Without warning, one of the human ships began to change. Its hull flowed like liquid metal, reconfiguring itself into something that resembled a Kryn vessel, then morphed into a perfect sphere, then took on shapes that couldn't exist in three-dimensional space. "Matter is just energy in a different form," Chen explained. "Energy is just information. And information, well, that's just what we agree it is." The sphere ship suddenly split into 1,000 smaller orbs, each one taking up position near a Kryn vessel. They pulsed with a soft light that somehow felt friendly. "Your ships are impressive," Chen continued, "but they're limited by your assumptions about how things must work. Watch." The nearest orb to the dominance extended a tendril of light that passed through the hull as if it wasn't there. Alarms blared across the bridge as the tendril touched the main power core. And then the alarms stopped. The power readings stabilized. In fact, they improved. "We just increased your reactor efficiency by 300%, Chen said. "Not by adding technology, but by convincing your existing technology that it could work better." Science Officer Thrain was beyond shock. "They're rewriting the quantum state of our reactor." That's impossible," Chen suggested. "That word seems to come up a lot in our conversations." Zarkith watched as similar tendrils touched each ship in his fleet. Damage from micrometeorites healed. Stressed hull plates relaxed. Systems that had been operating at 90% efficiency suddenly jumped to levels that shouldn't be achievable. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. "Because the greatest weapon isn't destruction, Admiral. It's understanding. Your empire expanded through force because that's all you knew. We're showing you another way." The human fleet began a demonstration that would be remembered in Kryn history as the Day of Impossibilities. Ships merged and separated like drops of water. They created temporary stars that provided energy without radiation. They folded space to show the Kryn crew views of their homeworld from impossible angles. One ship turned transparent, revealing its crew. Beams that looked remarkably fragile compared to the armored Kryn, yet moved with a confidence that suggested they knew something fundamental about the universe that others didn't. "You see," Chen's voice continued, "humans evolved on a world where survival required not just adaptation, but imagination. We had to believe in the impossible just to stay alive. And somewhere along the way, we realized that if you believe hard enough, if you understand deeply enough, the universe starts to believe with you." "This is madness," Zarkith said, but there was no conviction in his voice. "No, Admiral. This is possibility. Your empire has spent millennia mastering the rules. We spent our time learning to rewrite them." The demonstration reached its climax when the human flagship began to glow with an inner light. Space itself seemed to twist around it, and suddenly the entire Kryn fleet found themselves elsewhere, in orbit around Earth, thousands of light years from where they'd been. "Impossible," Thrain whispered for what felt like the 100th time. "We didn't move you through space," Chen explained. "We convinced the universe that you were always here. Distance is just a concept after all." Below them, Earth turned slowly, a blue-green jewel that looked too fragile to have produced such beings. Yet as they watched, ships rose from the surface in defiance of gravity. Space stations assembled themselves from raw materials, and energy fields played across the atmosphere in patterns that spoke of casual mastery over fundamental forces. "We could have destroyed you," Chen said softly. "Instead, we chose to free you. Free you from the limitations of thinking that the universe has rules that can't be bent, broken, or rewritten." Zarkith felt something shift in his understanding. The Empire had always equated power with destruction, advancement with conquest. But these humans showed power through creation, advancement through transcendence. "What do you want from us?" he asked. "Nothing," Chen replied. "And everything. We want you to imagine, to dream, to look at the impossible and ask, why not? We want you to join us in exploring not just the universe as it is, but as it could be." The human ships began to shift again, forming a pattern that somehow conveyed welcome, possibility, and infinite potential. "The choice is yours, Admiral. You can return to your empire and continue as you were, limited by what you believe is possible, or you can take the first step into a larger universe, one where the only real law is that there are no unbreakable laws." Zarkith looked at his crew. He saw fear, yes, but also wonder. Curiosity, the first sparks of imagination that had been suppressed by millennia of rigid thinking. "Show us," he said finally. "Show us how to see the universe as you do." Admiral Chen's response carried a warmth that transcended species. "Welcome to the impossible, Admiral. Let's rewrite reality together." As the Kryn fleet began its transformation from conquerors to dreamers, the galaxy itself seemed to hold its breath. The Empire had encountered many species in its expansion, but none like these humans who looked at the laws of physics and saw not constraints, but suggestions. The war that never happened would be remembered not for its battles, but for its lesson, that the most powerful force in the universe isn't energy or matter, but the audacity to believe that anything is possible. And somewhere in the quantum foam, reality itself smiled and prepared for the changes to come. Retroclad can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.